It's semantics where we can't say heartbeat because it's inside the womb. Therefore, any type of activity that is inside the womb cannot be associated with activity that's outside the womb. So you immediately associate less than human characteristics to a particular group that is in a particular state. That sort of mentality is exactly what would happen in the South, where the people of the South referred to, well, anything that is black is slave. Anything that is of black is slaveness. Like that's the exact sort of thing that they would apply. So it's sort of mental gymnastics to try to get around the fact that, no, wait, these are humans.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the Pinedo Brothers Podcast. I'm your host, Peter, and I have with me my brother.
Hey, I'm JP.
JP in the house. Well, I'm back from my week-long vacation.
What were you doing? Partying in the Himalayas, Peter?
I was actually meditating with the monks in the mountains of Tibet.
Okay. So have you come to share your insight with us now?
Yes, I am now enlightened and am able to share all types of wisdom and knowledge.
Wonderful. Thank you.
But welcome back, everyone. I'm glad that you're here with us. Today, we're talking about some pretty heavy stuff, but very, very important. And honestly, I think definitely the most, the greatest struggle of our time that we're facing. And that is abortion. Abortion is one of those topics that people oftentimes really hesitate to talk about. But I think it's undeniable at this point that everyone's talking about it because it is one of the most polarizing issues that we face today. And everyone has an opinion one way or the other. And it's extremely passionate debate. But before we get into that, did you have any thoughts, JP, that you want to add?
Two thoughts. You hit the nail on the head when you said that people are hesitant to talk about it. I wouldn't be surprised if this podcast does not get people to really listen to it. I mean, I'm sure it'll be mostly Google's fault if that's the case, but still, if we were to compare this back, and I think this is something that we need to do constantly, because the abortion debate harkens back very much to the slavery debate. And people didn't want to talk about slavery, just like how people don't want to talk about abortion and what the reality on the ground is. We didn't want to talk about what the reality on the ground was of slavery. The South didn't want to talk about it. The North didn't want to talk about it. The North quietly ended slavery. And then the South, just said, well, we're going to keep doing it. This is an ugly necessity is the way they would refer to it quite often in primary documents. Some people would call it a beautiful, I think there was a small minority of the South that would be the scream your abortion minority here in the United States, which you hear that from time to time. That sort of wear your abortion on your sleeve. Just like the South would say, well, we're going to show that we're slaveholders and wear that on our sleeve. But the vast majority of people thought it was kind of disgusting and they didn't want to talk about it. Just like we thought about we feel with abortion in a lot of ways. But this week really has forced everyone to talk about it. There is the gruesome reality. And if you're about to tune off because you think that, we're completely in the wrong about abortion, I would encourage you, I'll put a link in the description to just take a look at what was uncovered in Washington, D.C. this week. And tell me that you still, if you could look at the images of what they found about the gruesome reality of abortion and still feel like you want to support abortion, well, then there's really not much that Peter and I could say to convince you after seeing that image. But just take a look at it and before you turn this podcast off, because it is gruesome.
Yeah, I was just actually covering that story yesterday. And it is, I think that there were doctors, neonatologists who were kind of giving their opinions on it, and like writing they were like kind of estimating how old the babies were when they were killed, and like what methods of abortion were most likely used. If you're not familiar with the story, recently the DC police it was brought to their attention that there were these 5 aborted babies. Their remains, their bodies were in this apartment, and when the police found them, it's just like they took some footage of it, and it's just completely horrifying to see the actual consequences of abortion.
Because these are fully formed humans that have been mutilated.
There was, I think the oldest one was at 32 weeks into pregnancy, which is well into, the 3rd trimester, way beyond the point at which a baby is able to live outside the womb, because that's always the argument oftentimes the argument from abortion advocates, that if a baby's not viable, if it's not able to live outside the womb, then it's not fully a living being. But these babies most definitely were well into the 3rd trimester and able to live outside. And then there's also some questions that were raised from a lot of different groups, saying that it's possible, it based off of the scarring and the injuries that these babies sustained, that it's possible that they were either killed through partial birth abortions or even killed through infanticide. Because there's one whose injuries definitely look like partial birth abortion, which is illegal in the United States. The thing about DC, they're not like Texas at all. They're extremely radical and completely awful.
We've already spoken about how Texas is a little singular in that we allow for a more diverse spectrum of thought, and we are actually truly compassionate when it comes to caring about people who have less power than others. And what the DC police are really showing in this time is that they have a complete utter lack of compassion. There's no regard for justice for these 5. There's no regard for finding out the truth about what happened to these 5. I've heard that at least 2 of the babies, which you said, have the marks of a partial birth abortion, which means that the back of their neck is cut open and their brains are sucked out, which is an illegal and a barbaric act that. And just to clarify to everyone, the baby is already halfway out of the mother at that point when this happens. So the baby's coming out, and they cut open the back of the neck and suck out the baby's brains. And the DC police, even though this is an illegal act, do not care to investigate it. There's no compassion for these 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the one with the partial birth abortion, I think that they were saying the indications there, the neck, and also the way the head was crushed. Those are the 2 methods usually of the partial birth: partially deliver the baby and then either crush the neck or crush the head or suck out the brain through suction. The other one, there was another baby who was pretty intact, and the thought is that it was possible that the baby was delivered and then just left out in the elements and to die. There are ties as well to some abortionists in DC who have been found through private investigation, like through live action and all that, to have said that on tape, like that if a baby is born alive despite attempts to abort it, that they'll just that doctor has said he'll just leave it out and let it die, which is illegal in the United States. So obviously, like, all of these things should be illegal, and they're deeply disturbing. But it's been kind of a progression, I think, through society.
Speaking of progression, just the latest, I hear that California is going to legalize infanticide now. Speaking of a lack of compassion, did you hear about that?
No, I don't think so.
Well, that's something that I heard about from Lila Rose just yesterday. Lila Rose of Live Action, who's been doing great work on the story we're talking about now, was also reporting that it looks they are moving a bill through the California Congress where they're going to legalize infanticide of perinatal, which is the first, I think, 2 or 3 weeks of the baby's life outside the womb, either by neglect, like how these doctors did, or by abject, killing of of this child. I'm not sure it will be a lethal injection or something barbaric, like, sucking out the baby's brains while it's lying there on the table. I guess both are barbaric, but it is a logical progression that you see where it's a complete and utter lack of justice, a complete and utter lack of compassion for life, for people that are weaker than us, that California is really blazing the trail.
And you see, as like we were saying, it's been a progression throughout the years and the decades, and the arguments for abortion have really, it's really crazy to kind of take a step back and look at them, how they've changed. Because at the beginning, it was like Planned Parenthood was a contraceptive organization, didn't do abortions because abortions were illegal, and as time, the argument, you get them to accept one thing, and then you continue to push them to more and more darker and more radical kinds of concepts until you get today, where you have like things like partial birth abortion and infanticide. But you see just how like the argument has shifted from safe, legal, and rare kind of abortions to now things like shout your abortion and like infanticide is good. Like it's just the logical like progression, what you were saying, of this type of reasoning. And it really, to me, I think it comes from just a loss of value for and respect for life, and not just other life, but also your own life, right? First you have to value your own life and to value your own existence in order to see the good and the value of others' existence. And so I think that as a society, like we've talked about in the podcast before, how there's that kind of hopelessness, that lack of direction, that lack of seeing any value in creation. And so if you don't see any value in creation and see no good in life, then it makes complete sense that you would progress to where we are today.
Yeah, it's a complete. It makes sense. It makes sense. It doesn't make it less tragic. It doesn't make it less horrific that once your mind slips just a little bit on valuing life, then it's just going to keep on slipping. It's going to keep on slipping, because what is the difference between a fully formed human inside the mother's womb and a fully formed human outside the mother's womb? Really, like philosophically speaking, if you can't protect one because the mother, because whatever reason why, if you can't protect one inside the womb, how can you do it outside? So, and then when does it magically change that this human has rights? When is that magically granted to this person? Because there's no, I mean, I've watched our son grow this past 16, 17 months outside the womb. There's no magical moment where the person is different. And it's not like he wakes up at 4 months and all of a sudden I'm like, you're a person.
You have value now.
Yeah, there's nothing magical that ever like happens. So when are you going to grant rights to a person, the right to life, if you don't do it at the very beginning?
Right. Well, I think, BJ, I think that you would be happy to know that this year I will have value. My value will be bestowed upon me by nature when I turn 25 this year, because your brain isn't finished completely forming until the age of 25. So I will finally be a completely developed and fully formed human being. So starting September, I will have value.
Congratulations. So I have just a few more months to off you, is what you're saying.
You could kill me right now, and that's fine, you know. But that's the thing, like that's the argument oftentimes always made, is that there is a lesser degree of value in a fetus or an embryo, like at different stages of development. Like with the Texas Heartbeat Act, it was crazy to see how much the narrative from the media and from, just all these different influencers was that they were like, this is not even a heartbeat. Like, this is not even a heart. This is just a cardiac cell with the language they used was it's cardiac activity, electrical pulses. And I was like, so you're describing a heartbeat?
Yeah.
They're like, it's not a fully formed heart. I'm like, okay, so because it's still developing, that means it's not actually a heart? Like, that doesn't make any sense. If it's doing all the same functions, you're using semantic games to describe the same functions as a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what we're looking at, is a developing heart and a heartbeat. And really, what's that?
Well, it's that same exact language is what people in the South would use. That's sort of wordplay. Where, well, if it's inside, it's semantics. Where, okay, we can't say heartbeat because it's inside the womb. Therefore, anything that is any person inside the womb, any type of activity that is inside the womb, cannot be associated with activity that's outside the womb. So you immediately associate less than human characteristics to a particular group that is in a particular state. That sort of mentality is exactly what would happen in the South, where the people of the South pre-bellum, pre-post-Civil War, referred to, well, anything that is black is slave. Anything that is of black is slaveness. Like that's the exact sort of thing that they would apply. So it's sort of mental gymnastics to try to get around the fact that, no, wait, these are humans that you're enslaving and that you're treating barbarically on many occasions. And you see that now applied. This is history repeating itself.
Yeah, which is really, it's interesting to see that you have to, in order to devalue something like human life, you have to find arbitrary lines somewhere, unless you want to make the argument that, people, that you can kill a person at any point, which some people do. Some people are just like, there's too many humans.
I've heard the argument, yes.
Yeah, which is crazy. But for the majority of the people, they have to find like an arbitrary line somewhere where value is bestowed on a person. And at the beginning, when abortion was first legalized in the United States, it was Roe v. Wade. It was a viability line, which the idea of viability, like I was saying just a second ago, was that this is the point at which a baby is formed enough in order to live outside the womb. They placed this at, I don't remember exactly what number of weeks it was into pregnancy that this baby was supposedly able to live outside the womb. But we're finding out now that was completely wrong. As the science has progressed and we've been able to learn more about fetal development, we realized, that was completely wrong. And so that's why now, like, the Supreme Court is looking at it and saying, like, this is not only a poorly written law, as in our decision, as in Roe v. Wade, but also it's based off of science that's just not correct. And so, like, the viability, since almost 50 years have passed since Roe v. Wade, that line has been constantly just moving, and it's moving forward. As we realize that, like, actually these babies are more developed than we thought, and they're actually able to survive at this point. And so it's really, I think, kind of backing the abortion argument into a corner where it's like pretty much the only argument they can make is babies don't have any value.
Well, I would push it even further and say that abortion is just like slavery was clearly on the way out. Like you could not continue the path of slavery. The South was crumbling economically because of slavery. Now, they were convinced at the time that this was what was propping up their economy, but their economy was in shambles already. And it was because slavery was holding them back. Just like the handwriting is on the wall with, or was on the wall with slavery, the handwriting is on the wall with abortion. It's a question upon how will you be remembered in this debate? Because I can see in the not so distant future, just how you're saying right now that viability keeps getting moved earlier and earlier. Eventually, I'm not sure if this is a good thing, but I know we're headed this direction. Eventually, you're not going to have a baby inside a woman's womb at all. Mm-hmm. You'll be able to grow a human. And if a woman wants it, I bet after the fun part of making humans is over, you could just transplant that human into that little pod, and then that human grows inside the pod. And then you could probably claim the human after the human is developed enough to come out of the pod, and you have a baby. Or you could just say that's an orphan human. And we're going to look back in this time in this history, because it's going to be so apparent that there is a human growing, because it's going to be outside for all to see. It'll be a little glass pod, and we'll see this human growing. And it's going to be so apparent that we are barbarians, us of the right now, because we kill these little humans that are so helpless. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of time that people are going to look back and say, look at these barbarians. Just like how we look back now to the Southern slaveholders and say, you are barbarians for what you did to your brothers, your Black brothers and sisters. We're going to look back on our own culture right now and say, you are barbaric for what you did to your little brothers and sisters. So we have to decide where we're going to stand on that side. And I think this is actually something that excites me, is this is a time where the South can redeem itself. We can actually be on the right side of history again and say, no, we're going to get this one right. I like that, though.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because as the Supreme Court is currently considering overturning Roe v. Wade. And the thing about Roe v. Wade is that it's not a law, right? It's a decision. It's a Supreme Court decision that found all state laws banning abortion were unconstitutional. So when that law, or when that decision is overturned, when Roe v. Wade is overturned, it doesn't illegalize abortion. It returns that decision-making capability back to the states. That's why you get something like California, where they're becoming more and more extreme in their support for abortion and killing babies. And then you have other states which are preparing to end abortion within their states. So luckily, Texas is prepared so that if Roe v. Wade is overturned, we have something called a trigger ban, which will immediately end abortions in Texas. The majority of the southern states have a trigger ban as well. So for the majority of the South will immediately illegalize abortion once Roe v. Wade is overturned. There are actually 26 of the 50 states are prepared to do that, to end abortion once the federal government gets out of the way. There are a few states like California, Colorado, and New York who have moved to make abortion a state constitutional right, so that if Roe v. Wade is overturned, there's no way that someone could end abortion in that state without changing the Constitution. So they'll have a similar situation as we do right now, federally, just on their state. So it really is a opportunity for the South to redeem itself, and also there's a lot of the kind of Central America. Those states have made moves to end abortion. Are you able to share screen? Is that something that you can do? Do you want to maybe look up a state or a map of which states are poised to end abortion? 26 states.
Oh, the Guttmacher Institute, the data arm of Planned Parenthood.
Yes.
Here we go.
Yeah, so you can see the South there is ready to go. And then there's Central Illinois, obviously, because Chicago is pretty bad. But yeah, these are the states in orange are the ones that are most likely to ban abortion. And then you have, like, obviously, I think the West Coast is radical for abortion, and then the Northeast is also very much for abortion. So
I'd like to spin a hypothetical here, Pete, and see what you think about it. So I look at this map, and again, I cannot help but think about the Civil War, because the map looked, well, obviously the West states were not really a part of the country at that time, but take out the west side of the country and just go from, like, cut it across from Texas up through Michigan. And the map is pretty much the same from Civil War to how the South divided from the North during the Civil War. So my question to you, Peter, is what happens if people get mad? Let's say that the South, Roe versus Wade is overturned. People in the North and the West will be very upset at the South, because the South is going to outlaw, or all the orange states here are going to outlaw abortion and try to protect human life. But what happens if the federal government, if states start to think that the federal government is going to do that? Like right now, the federal government is the opposite way. The federal government is fine with the barbaric and brutal killing of human life. But what happens if the federal government is controlled by people that do not believe this is a good thing? Just like how the federal government became controlled by someone who, well, wasn't sure if slavery was a good thing. And the South was convinced, I would say erroneously, the South was convinced that this person was going to end slavery, and so they left. They left the Union. What happens if the North and the West get convinced, maybe even erroneously, that the federal government is going to end this barbaric killing of humans? What do you think they'll do?
I mean, that's really hard to say. I guess at this point, I am very doubtful that something like the Civil War would happen. Just because I don't think that we have the same level of, like, literally speaking, militancy as we did then. Because if you're talking about like a civil war, you have to think of like who's doing the fighting, right?
Yeah, but Peter, people get angry about abortion. Mm-hmm. You bring it up. I've seen the hatred in people's eyes at me for bringing up this issue. People would kill me for what I've been saying.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like people will definitely kill over abortion. I think that
surprise.
Yeah, people will kill people in order to kill people.
Yeah.
I think that when Roe v. Wade is overturned, whether that's through, this summer through the Dobbs versus Jackson case, or through sometime in the future through another case, I think you will probably see a lot of terrorist activity from abortion activists. I think that you'll probably see a good number of violent acts. I don't know exactly what will happen, but hopefully, and hopefully pro-lifers and capitals and all of that will be protected. Hopefully people will be protected in general. But I do think that you will see a good number of outrage, a lot of kind of violent rhetoric, especially too, from politicians and from activists. I'm just not sure if, like what you were saying, is if things progress and it looks, people get the idea that the federal government is going to illegalize abortion federally. I could definitely see there being a lot of violence growing from that. I'm not really sure where the military aspect of that conflict would come, because right now there's not much military involvement. I think during the Civil War, there was obviously the states had a lot more of a political presence than they do now. And really our military is very federalized, which I don't think was the case at all during right before the Civil War.
Well, there was a lot more states' rights back then. The states had a lot more sovereignty.
Right, but yeah, you have people like Robert E. Lee, who was probably the best general in the United States at the time.
Without a doubt. And his military mind was without peer.
Right, but he joined the South because of his loyalty to Virginia. But I don't think you have that at all with any of the generals or any of the military today.
Outside of maybe Texas. You don't think Texas has a little bit of that call to loyalty?
I definitely think that for many of the soldiers, yes. Probably a lot of soldiers would be more apt to fight for Texas than for another state, or if the federal government turned on Texas. I'm just not sure about the generals. The generals that we have today are not, they're different.
I gotcha.
And so I think they're much more federally oriented.
Yeah. It goes to show how politics has invaded everything.
Mm-hmm. But I'm not saying that it's not possible that something like that would happen. I think that if it was going to happen, I think abortion would definitely be a huge part of that, because it is the main issue.
It is the issue. It like you said at the very beginning of this podcast, it is the issue of our time. It is right in front of your face. Like, okay, the war in Ukraine is waging right now, and it's tragic and it's terrible, but that's on the other side of the world. Literally, we have something that's happening down the street right now in every country. I mean, in every city, in every state in this nation. It's happening right this moment. Someone's being brutally dismembered and torn apart. It's right in front of our face. So it is the issue. It is what's going to draw us out into conflict at some point. And I think what we need to do is, this sounds a little bit callous, I suppose, but us that are on the right side of history and that we actually care compassionately about people, about life at all stages. Either you're a pregnant mother or you're a little girl inside that pregnant mother's womb. We need to let the people that want to kill go. Like, I know that's callous, that you want to save everyone, right? You want to be able to save the unborn children in these northern states, in New York and in California. But I don't think you can do that at the point of a gun. I don't think you have that ability. And if they want to leave the country, and if they want to kill indiscriminately, I think God will have to be their judge. And at that point, let them go. Because that's not what happened in the Civil War. And maybe that was the right thing at the time. I don't know. I have a hard time saying anything is like, how many people died in the Civil Wars? Like 750,000 Americans, I think it was. It was a lot of Americans. And I mean, obviously more people have died through abortion already. More Americans have died through abortion already, but still, I don't think we can start a bloody war over this. And it's going to, at some point, abortion will end. It'll have to be the people that decide to live in these kill states that need to come to their senses, though. And we can help in any way, but I don't think starting a war is the right answer.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that once we get Roe v. Wade out of the way, and even now, but especially after Roe v. Wade is out of the way and the decision is returned to the states, I think that the emphasis should also be, we need to re-emphasize the cultural aspect of this, because it's cultural norms and cultural ideals that got us to where we are today. And so we could illegalize abortion tomorrow, but if we don't change our societal outlook on life and valuing the human person, then we're just going to continue killing people and and abusing life. So that is something that's crucially important. And I think that is the way to ultimately to save all lives in all states, to focus on returning value to the human person in people's eyes. And that can be through any, like, literally, that's the thing about it, is that it's through any medium and any place of work, any job. It's on you to value the human person and to signal to the world that they are valued, right? Because it's the same thing as if you're just like dialoguing with someone who supports abortion. You're not going to convince them that you value life if you're not valuing their life. If you're like belittling them and calling them all kinds of names in the name of saying the life is precious, that's cognitive dissonance. That doesn't make sense. And something it's really crazy, because when people like love to attack Texas, because Texas is at the forefront of the fight to end abortion, and people will say that Texas is oppressing women and reproductive rights and all of this, but really the focus is on saving lives and saving actual human beings from abortion. And since abortion was legalized, over 65 million human beings have died through abortion. And those are conservative numbers.
Right.
The real numbers are probably much higher.
We've killed way more than Hitler and Stalin and Lenin and Mao combined.
It's unspeakably tragic, but I think that valuing the human person and returning that idea to culture is how you fix this. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen overnight.
How did we get here, Peter? Well, in your mind, how did our culture get to so radically devalue human life in the womb?
Well, yeah. Then I'll finish my thought.
Okay, go ahead.
Getting all over the place. I'm getting all over the place. The thing about Texas is that people would say that they're attacking women, but in the same session that the Texas Heartbeat Act was passed, which essentially bans abortion up to starting after 6 weeks, Texas also passed something called the Alternatives to Abortion program, which they fully funded it at $100 million. And what this is a network throughout the state of Texas of pregnancy resource centers that supply like free childcare, they give resources to women for free who are in difficult pregnancy situations. And that is completely ignored in the narrative about the Texas Heartbeat Act, because the idea that I'm trying to convey here is that you don't just ban abortion, but you also create resources in order to help people, because you do value the woman and the child, and not just women, but also like families. anyone who is suffering through these difficult situations, you're able to give them the resources that say, like, all right, so killing is not the answer, but we do understand that you're in a difficult situation and we are able to help you in this way. So it's stepping up to the challenge. You don't just say, no, this is not allowed, but the way that you continue to push the narrative or to progress the narrative to valuing life is that you don't just end something, but you continue to help them through the process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, true compassion. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. But as far as how we got here today, I mean, I think it's just been, like we were saying, it's a progression for sure of one idea building on the other. And to me, I really do think that it really comes to just an attack on the family, right? We don't see any, in many ways, culture today doesn't see any worth in the family. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of a Marxist idea, kind of trying to abolish the, what is it called? The atomic family?
Nuclear.
The nuclear, okay. Yeah, but I really think that's what it really comes from, is that rejection of the nuclear family and rejection of kind of Christian values. What are your thoughts? What do you think about how we got here?
Well, yeah, that makes sense to me. That rings true. I really don't know how we got here. If I was going to just try and think it out, there was a lot of people that have made points about this was a progression of the contraception, the contraceptive pill, the pill, where mm-hmm. you separate sex from bringing new life into the world. I think there's an argument to be made about that, but that's much longer I think that you could do a podcast just on the pill itself, and you probably wouldn't have enough time to go through it. So that's a possibility. I think that there was this might be just the universal struggle here. There's always going to be a struggle between good and evil will find new hats to wear, right? Mm-hmm. Like the evil doesn't ever wear the same face. Otherwise it'd be too easy. And every generation has a moment that we're here to do something, right? We're here to fight a battle, to raise good families, to be a voice for compassion and for good, and for to speak the truth whenever we can. Obviously, I mean, this is nothing singular about our generation. This is every person's call. So no one listening to this should get a big head about it. This is just the call to be human, that everyone hears at every point in time throughout the history of time. But maybe our battle is to be fought over abortion. Maybe this is how we can answer the call, is on this debate. But how it came to this, how we've indiscriminately killed 65 million, you said, 65 million people, and that's just in this country? Mm-hmm. How we killed 65 million on at least innocent Americans who've never harmed anyone. It's hard. It boggles my mind that we did it. I don't know how we as a culture got to this point. I think you slip by degrees, right? You take one step off the path. I don't know when that step was. Maybe it was the contraceptive pill. Maybe it was earlier than that. I don't know. Maybe it was when we dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. Maybe it was, we've had a lot of dark moments in our history, and any one of them could have nudged us off the path to where we got to this point. But I'm not sure. Yeah,
it's, I think that, especially going back to the DC, the babies that were found in DC, killing babies like that is inhuman. right? It's really hard. Like someone did that with their own hands. And I think we as Catholics, we're taught to pray for the conversion of those people who are using their hands to crush a baby's skull. But I think that we pray for that person, but when you look at the that kind of violence, that is clearly inhuman. That is not something that comes from a human being. That is clearly demonically influenced. And so I think that if you just look at history and you look at even the Bible, you see that demons love killing babies, like with the Moloch, the pagan god Moloch, which I think is pretty clear in the Bible that it was some kind of demon, because of how many times God in the Bible was reminding people that they had to reject Moloch, because Moloch was a god that demanded baby sacrifice.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, they would have a statue with a large mouth, like an animal type mouth. They would place the baby inside the mouth, and then sometimes, go ahead.
There was a fire inside of the statue, and so they would immolate the baby inside of the statue's mouth.
Right.
And so I kind of think this is the newest, this is the modern form of that. And it's, I'm not saying that the people who are killing those babies are demons, because those abortionists are people who can still convert. And there are many abortionists who have converted, and now they are fighting for life. And so that's wonderful. But it's just, what I'm saying is that the influence there, it's really, I think it's a demonically influenced thing.
And this is something that occurred to me yesterday when I was hearing about what's going on in California, is the best way that I know to speak about this is in story. And something like what you just pictured was exactly the demon god Moloch was exactly what came to mind, is that sort of story. It should be told in fairy tale, because we would be too petrified if it was told in reality. But if we tell it in a fairy tale, maybe we can get by. And we weave this story, and it's just springing to my mind now about these realities. And we're not telling a propaganda piece, but we need to speak to the truth of our time. We need to speak about what the great moments that we experience, because otherwise our art is empty if we don't speak to our time. So it's springing into my mind this story of a fairy tale about this exact same story, about this woman that encounters a cult that offers sacrifices to Moloch. And it's in this way, it's a parable about what we do daily. It's not so much the cult is us. We are the people that are offering to the demon god on a daily basis on the altar of your local Planned Parenthood, or making this sacrifice. But we tell it through the lens of a fairy tale and of a story, and we can bear it, because you can't bear it if you say it the other way. And that's kind of the story that's springing to my mind. What do you think?
I think that sounds like a story that we gotta make.
Nice. Got to work on it. Yeah, I sent an email to an old friend of mine in LA about trying to get an actor that I think would be perfect in this movie yesterday. Hopefully we're able to get her. I think she'd be great.
So this is an exciting project. I think that this will be really good, and especially given everything that we've said, this is the kind of this is the issue of our time, and this is something that we have to speak to in art. So I'm excited that we're kind of in the conception stages of this project, which I think will be really great.
Yeah, and anyone that's listening right now, leave a comment. Tell me what you think, because I think the more ideas that we get and the more feedback that we get on this, the better. So that would be really helpful. But Peter, what are other ways that we can speak out? Do you have any suggestions for us, especially with what's happening with the DC-5?
Yeah, there's lots and lots of ways that people can kind of fight back against abortion. And I think that it's important that everyone fights back in some form or fashion. The most important and the most base way of fighting is to focus on that cultural issue, because everyone affects culture, and culture affects us, and we affect culture. And I think that like I was saying, the only way that we're ultimately going to end this kind of abortion mentality is to return the respect and value to human beings. And so, like, just people that you interact with on a daily basis at the grocery store, at the just wherever you are, on the highway, like, kind of keeping that in mind, that you are on a mission. Your mission is to return respect to human beings. And so, like, you can say, like, it's hard, and obviously, like, I'm not saying that I'm perfect or any of us are perfect, because oftentimes you'll have those shortcomings. But if you have that mentality that you want to respect others, and, like, at the grocery store, you can be like, at the shopping clerk, you can be like, "How's your day?" Like, try to make eye contact with them, and it's really funny to, like, how like some people will be really shocked when you do that, and they'll be like, "Wow, like, wow, you actually looked at me. That's crazy." And so that, I think, is, like, the most important, like, baseline kind of way to fight back. But then, of course, there are actual killings going on in this city and in your city, wherever you are. There are abortion clinics, and I think it's really important to have a presence there, to go out there and to pray. If you are a Christian, you can pray, but also you can be there to witness that there are other options for people who are going into those abortion clinics, because oftentimes people feel trapped into going there. They think it's their only option. So just having a presence there shows that there's something else for them. So long as it's a loving presence. You don't want to be screaming and shouting at those people.
Well, there's a movement called 40 Days for Life that helps people to schedule time and organize themselves to go out to their local Planned Parenthood to pray. It's all about prayer. It's not any type of demonstration or protest. Maybe we drop a link, because most major cities have a 40 Days for Life that is probably going on now, because it's Lent right now. So I'll put that in the description. Yeah.
And then, of course, the legislative side of this fight is also important. Like, I think civic engagement is something that we oftentimes forget about as Americans, but it's a very American value, to be engaged with what is going on in legislation. So, like, lobbying, contacting your senators and your representatives and letting them know how much you value life means a lot to making them value, because they're there to represent your values. A lot of them don't actually, but they still are influenced by what you tell them. And so contacting your legislators is super important. So there's many, many different ways you can be involved.
On that note, Peter, I got an email from Lila. It was a mass email. She doesn't email me personally, but Lila Rose of Live Action, encouraging everyone in that email to call the mayor of DC, which seemed unusual to me because I'm not one of his constituents. So I hesitated to do it. But what do you think? What do you make of that? Do you think that's worthwhile?
I mean, I think it's most valuable to contact people that represent you.
Okay.
So it means more when you contact your own mayor. I think maybe, I'm not familiar with that campaign to contact her, but maybe I think that the idea there is to express that is just not acceptable. So it is worthwhile to do, to contact the mayor and of DC and be telling her that, like, no, that's not, this is something that we as Americans cannot stand for and stand staunchly against, and demanding action. The mayor of DC is pretty radically leftist. And so I'm not sure that this will change her mentality. But it's always worthwhile to express that you stand against this.
Yeah, I'm wondering, this is probably pie in the sky, and we need to bring this to a close and not bring down more pie from the sky. But it seems to me like this is such a uniting issue, like justice for the DC5. Like that's a hashtag right there, justice for the 5, or however we want to do it. I mean, if BLM can make everyone put a black frame on their social for how long? Like everyone did it. Because I don't know why. Because was it because George Floyd was killed? I don't know. It was around that time. Couldn't we at least find a viral way to express that we want justice for our DC5? We want to find justice for the DC5. Like, why can't we start a campaign where we have our own black frame? I don't know. Well, that's probably something for people that have a lot more followings than us to start. But it seems, I don't know, leave something in the comments if you think that that's worthwhile too, because something should happen. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I definitely think that it's very important to raise awareness whatever way we can about this kind of violence, because it's really just being swept under the rug. And if you, as a listener, are going to look this up, it's extremely, extremely graphic and extremely disturbing. And if you don't have an opinion on abortion, this will make you have an opinion. So it's something that, we can't allow to be swept under the rug.
Mm-hmm. Never. It's too much. Everything is too much, but you can't ignore this. But anyway, we should probably end it there. Any last thoughts for us, Pete?
Well, I think that about covers it. I'm glad that y'all were able to join us. This has been a heavy stuff, but very crucially important stuff. And I hope that something in here in this episode will trigger you to form your opinion more if you haven't formed an opinion, and to hopefully take a stand for life.
Yeah, me too. And I'll leave a number for the DC mayor that Lila sent out. I'll leave the image or the links that you can see these images if you wish. I'll leave, how about a way that you can find out who your representatives are in the comment, so that way you can contact them. I know my representative, where he stands on this. And I think, is anything else I should leave for people?
Maybe just a list of pregnancy resource centers.
Great.
I can get that to you.
Thank you. All right. Well, we're the Pinedo Brothers, Catholic filmmaking brothers, working to revitalize the world of Catholic art through film.
Yep. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Pinedo Brothers Podcast, an artist podcast for Catholics. We hope you enjoyed it, and if so, please consider subscribing, and commenting below. That really helps. This episode was edited and recorded by me, JP. Makeup was done by no one, if you couldn't tell. The Pinedo Brothers are Catholic filmmaking brothers working to revitalize the world of Catholic art through film. For more information on us, check us out at pinedobrothers.com. Thanks again.